go over the first the cash position report.
Okay, this is cash/fund position report. It's not the title of that, but that's what it is. Basically, it's just showing the accumulation of the activity from January 1st through June 30th. So the beginning balance column is basically the balance at the end of 2013 as included in these statements. Like I said, these numbers are unaudited. It's very important that you know these are unaudited numbers, okay? So the audit is being prepared now. And as I stated before, some of these numbers may or may not change based on whatever their findings are. But as we sit here looking at the records as they've been accounted for in the office, the beginning balance, and of course I think we discussed those quite a bit, and that's basically what the whole fiscal watch was about, the deficit balances, the funds with the deficit balance. It does not address the positive numbers. So I don't know what we need to talk about. I mean, it's sort of self-explanatory where you have the general fund deficit and the street lighting, the police and fire service, and those are the funds that we just spoke about in terms of the recovery plan. The next column is the year-to-date revenue. In other words, that's all of the cash that's been reported as of June 30 that has come to the center, to the city. And correspondingly, we have the year-to-date expenses, and these are all of the checks that's been written. So these are cash items. And then you have the unexpended balance. The next column is the outstanding encumbrances. So those are basically open POs where there's been commitment, but you know the checks have not been written. So when the check is written, it will move from that column to the year-to-date expense column. So until the check is actually written. And then the ending balance, basically sort of like a position, the city's position, where you start out with a number, and you add your revenues, subtract your expenses, you subtract your outstanding encumbrances, and then you have your ending balance. As of this is a snapshot on June 30th. And the thing to keep in mind is that this is cash, and the encumbrances, some of those are blanket POs for the whole year. So that number is not technically as of June 30th. I mean, for example, there's bills, POs in there that may cover the whole year. We'll set up like for some of the contracts on the copiers and different things like that. So, and then of course the revenue is strictly cash, but then again, we do not receive that in 1/12 proportions. And that's what we have to remember, that this is not like a 1/12, or we cannot say that as of June 30th, we have received half of our budget, because that's not necessarily what this report tells you, okay? Because as you know, the property taxes come in periodically in lump sums, and then the settlement is in September, so you'll see a large influx probably in July in some of these for those periodic expenses. And then, I mean, revenue. And also the expenses, you have the same thing. Sometimes you have to make a lump sum payment, for example, like the debt. You know, it's not paid 1/12 every month. You pay it on June 1st, the end of the year. Same thing with OPWC and also with the Ohio Water Development. So that's why I say you just can't look at this and say we have received half of our monies or spent half. You know, those numbers may be more than half because they're not pro rata. So on the bottom line, as you can see, the 961, which is the same that was reported on your December 31st statement. And the revenue is $10,126,000. Expenses $10,212,000. So the unexpended balance at this point is $874,000. So that's basically the beginning balance plus the revenue minus the expenses, and, you know, if you're doing it like in the checkbook. And then you have the outstanding POs, the 1,000,007. You have your ending balance at this point of June 30th. And again, keep in mind, like I say, when you look at, example, when you look at the police service levy and fire levies and the pension funds and solid waste, the $895,000 from the solid waste is not attributable to the first half of the year. That covers the whole year, but we have not received the revenue to cover that. So that's why you can't just say that the city deficit is increasing or what have you. We have to really look at and analyze every number that's on here. So that's the statement of cash. But we just use it as a management tool to monitor the outstanding POs and what have you.
Do any of the committee members have any questions? Then could we go on to the revenue report, Irene?
Yes. Okay, the revenue report is basically the breakout of the revenue number that you see on this cash report. Like the $10,126,000 is like the total number you'll see for the year-to-date revenue on your revenue statement. And this is broken out by sources in terms of what we received and the source that has come in. So, I mean, I think you all have received these, so I don't know if you have any specific questions. I mean, I don't want to go read it verbatim. But it basically shows the first column is what was budgeted for the year. And this is not the revised appropriations and budget. We have to input that because that was not passed on June 30th. So when you receive the July statement, you'll see a change in terms of the budgeted numbers, the expected revenue, and the appropriations because of the amended appropriations that were approved for 2014. But this is the initial, and it's current year only. There's a couple of documents you receive that's used by the auditors. For example, in these numbers too, be mindful that being cash, whatever was spent, every check that was written, and there was like about $700,000 of checks written in this year for last year. So even when you look at these expenses, they're not totally for this year. It's just that they were paid in this year because we're on a cash basis. So in some areas, the expenses may seem high because, like I say, we're carrying expenses, as we know, for the waste collection and that. And some others we paid in 2014 that was part of, should have been paid in 2013. So we're trying to, catch up with all that, and but it's going to inflate the expenses for 2014 because, in terms of this statement, when you receive the audit, they will adjust for that. That's what the GAAP audit is. It will adjust for those payables and receivables. So, as you go down and you can see what has come in to date, what's left to be received on the various line items. And the target percent, of course, that being June half of the year, and it's prorated, it's targeted for 50%. But like I say, all the dollars don't come in evenly on a 1/12 basis, so some will be 50, some will be less. So I don't know if there was any, when you perused this, if you had any specific questions. You should have received these last week.
Does anyone? Yes, Mr. Brown.
Madam Finance Director, would you be able to explain on the analysis of cash investment, why are there 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5 different bank accounts. What is the function of them?
Mr. Bromley, that's on, we're going to get to that. That's on
Oh,
the agenda. Does anyone have any questions regarding the revenue report? All right. Can you go on to the expense report?
The expense report is set up in the same format where you have the approved appropriations, the first column. And again, these are not the amended appropriations. The year-to-date expenses, and then the unexpended. And as I was saying, that this, would include a lot of expenses for vendors that were paid from 2013. So as you look at these numbers, it doesn't necessarily mean that we have overspent this year's budget. It just means that we've written checks that may or may not exceed the various line items. And in terms of the forecast, that's one of the reasons it was not projected that the deficit would be eliminated this year. And I think that was part of the presentation from the auditors, that they did not expect us to rid ourselves of that deficit that we started the year with, not in 1 year. And we had a 5-year plan for that. So, we will be carrying a deficit. Nearly, like I say, there was about $700,000 of bills that were paid, that's included in these numbers from last year.
Do you think you're pretty much?
In terms of the bills, we're within 90 days. We're down to 90 days. We've tried to pay everything that was over 90 days. And then, of course, some of the bills are, well, I wouldn't say bills, but purchase orders are blankets that take us through the end of the year, such as waste management, also some of the pension. There's a couple of debt service. We try to approve those, encumber those, so that we can ensure that, there'll be dollars set aside for those purposes.
Irene, regarding the solid waste collection, how far along are we in the payment plan of getting caught up?
We're on schedule, yeah.
How many per se months per se are we?
Well, the agreement was to stay current, which means we paid the June, we received the bill the following month. So we have paid the June waste collection, which is about $97,000 plus. And then we have the agreement for the past of about $42,000 a month to the end of this year. And we're current, we pay that so we're current with the payments in terms of the agreements we've made.
How much is that a month for paying waste management?
With
For
the
pass.
42 plus, about 42.4. And that was to take us through the end of the year, if I'm not mistaken. And then the other condition when I negotiated the agreement is that we would stay current with, and pay on that backlog. So we're current with our payments. We've been current since the agreement. Otherwise, they will retract the agreement if we don't stay current. Because the other thing that I negotiated was that they would forgive all of the back interest and penalty, and it was quite substantial. So if we fall short, they will go back to claim to collect those dollars as well as take us off the plan.
You did a good job.
Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
the waste management is on page 5. That's the solid waste, for those that want to see. And it's 251, almost towards the bottom.
Yeah. I have. Okay. This is Mr. Rowley.
Madam Finance Director,
Yes.
the waste management agreement, when was that negotiated and for what amount?
It was negotiated when I started. I didn't bring the file, but it was in excess of 400,000, 420-some thousand. I could get you the number.
That was in February?
Yes, February or March. I started toward the end of January, so that was one of the first things that I did. And it was for 10 months, so it would have been about February. And
Okay.
that was based on 3 months, about 3, maybe 4 months delinquent
Mhm.
bills.
So we'll be caught up at the end of the year.
And I timed it because the contract before the extension ended in 2015. So we didn't want to, of course, they wouldn't even consider, but I didn't even ask, not knowing if we would be back with them next year at that time.
Councilman Jones?
To the chair, to the finance director, did Vince budge at all on the recount of homes?
No, he's pretty much sticking with his numbers, and in fairness to him, I have not had time to meet with him. I just haven't had time. So I will contact him to see if he's reconsidered or given more thought to it. But, you know, like I said, with the 3 projects going, I just haven't had a chance to meet with him.
Any other questions on this report?
And there's some other things, I'm sorry,
Okay.
Mr. Chair, there's some other things we're looking at for efficiency. You know, we're starting to look at the copiers and the leases, so we have meetings set up with those people because they're exorbitant. And just those kinds of things, you know, recycling the paper. And so once we get through, I call this bottleneck with all of this, we'll have time really to look at the operations with a fine-tooth comb, which we haven't had a chance to do since I came in, had to hit the ground running with the budgets and all.
Yeah.
But hopefully with the staff, which is the extra staff, we're starting to look at efficiencies and how we can save monies just on day-to-day operations, especially like the copiers, the computers and stuff like that.
We go on to the cash investment portfolio.
Basically, these are the bank balances at the end of June 30th. So for the bank, different accounts that the city has. Charter One operated. My understanding, and this account will be closed out. My understanding is that there was 2 operating accounts prior to this year. The Charter One basically is receiving the ambulance billings, this electronic revenue, and we have taken action to have that revenue sent and deposited with the Key Bank operating bank account. Once that happens, the Charter One will be closed out. Those are operating funds.
Irene, do you know when that account, do you anticipate closing that account?
I have no idea. I thought it would be by now, but the latest news we had, excuse me, let me address Chief Dursey.
Yes.
Chief Dursey, what was the latest in terms of their closing out? I know we had to send in more
We had one
paperwork.
file because there's an unauthorized signature for some reason, so I had to sign it. And we got the paperwork going to change who the authorized signatures from now on to put it to Irene. But we had to refile the paperwork.
So would it be about 4 weeks or so?
4 to 6 weeks, but I'll call tomorrow and find out where the status of that is at.
Okay, and then we'll close that out. Because the other thing too, in terms of efficiency, that account is $500 a month in service fees. $6,000. And plus I changed a lot of the Key Bank, met with their representatives to look at the different services we have and what we use. So we're saving quite a bit just on bank fees. But that account, I mean, to see $500 and we're getting in, say, you know, $20,000 a month or what have you, it's just too much. So as soon as the deposits, I don't want to close it out, then money comes in and bounce and get lost. So hopefully by September,
How much you say the service fees were?
$500 a month.
500, okay.
And that's a lot. We do nothing there, but this money comes there. I mean, we really don't do any other business with them, no wires, no payroll, nothing. So those are the kinds of things that we're looking at to save money too, you know. The escrow account, I think we all know what that is. Then there's our main account, key operating account for the, bills and payroll and what have you. The mayor's court. The Star Ohio was some monies that I think was invested there years and years and years ago. Basically, it's just interest, which is very minor, but it stays there. And then, of course, the petty cash fund, and that's basically accounts for the cash.
Mr. Rowley?
With the Key Bank escrow, what comes in, what funds funnel in through there?
None. I mean, those funds stopped back in January. So the only thing we're doing is paying out for those that came prior. There's a new arrangement with the title company that's handling this at this point. So it's not receiving any money, so we're just basically winding down for those deposits that may have come in prior to 2014.
So that was strictly for the building department?
Yeah, the escrow.
Uh-huh.
Chairman, Jackson.
Yes, Mr. Jackson?
Chairman, this Charter One account, so this account is going to be moved to Key,
Yes.
and what's going to be the service fees per month for this account at Key?
Oh, it won't be a separate account. It would be through the operating
It's gonna go-
account that we have.
Okay.
So the monies will be deposited there versus going to that separate account.
So there's going to be no increase in fees?
No, it's just be deposits, and we're not charged per deposit. And usually once a month now, I go and make a withdrawal and deposit it in Key. That's why it's at 18,000.
Mr. Rowley?
I have a follow-up question on the Key Bank escrow account. You said that this account is going down, we're paying out the remainder of the escrow funds that we already collected.
Right. Years.
Right, so it should be higher, it should have been, it was probably a lot higher in the past.
I'm making an assumption that it was, yes.
What confuses me then is that this report from the end of last year, end of December 2013, says there was only $31,000 in the escrow fund.
I saw that.
So that just doesn't make sense if that account should be going down now because we're paying it out.
Right.
And if we only had 31,000 while we were still collecting escrow, there was a whole lot more than that probably in escrow with us.
Like I say, those are unaudited numbers. I can't speak on them. I mean, when the audit finished, then we'll be able to see what truly was there. But that's from, as I stated, from these records, these printouts that we have. And so they're unaudited, the transactions has been recorded. And what was recorded in 2013, I can't really speak on it.
Councilman Jackson?
Mr. Trujasky, in this escrow account, that's going to fluctuate up and down all year, every month, depending on, I'm sorry,
Okay. Am I saying something new? I'm sorry.
well, I don't know, well, she was saying that we don't have that anymore. When we had it, am I correct in saying that money came in and out and that escrow account fluctuated up and down?
Ms. Wood?
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes.
Yes, it's like a pass-through. It's a holding account.
Right.
And just to be clear, my understanding, when I came, they were still collecting a few dollars. So I think that we stopped that. I have to look at the date. It was sometime probably maybe the 1st of February, but there wasn't that much. When we turned it over entirely to the title company. But during the month of January, my understanding is that prior to my arrival, there were a few dollars that still had been deposited there. So that could attribute to the balance being a little more than what it was at the end of December.
Are there any other questions?
Chairman.
Mr. Brownlee?
Is that, I think that would be something worth checking into, because we supposedly were keeping last year about $1 million on average in escrow. And all I see are almost $50,000 now, and there was only $31,000 in this escrow account back at the end of December. So seeing that we were usually keeping about $1 million in escrow, it's not possible that there was only $30,000 in there. A year ago, the previous finance director gave out a graph that showed that there was on average about $1 million in escrow. So perhaps we're mistaken on, is that something that you'd be able to check
No,
into?
we'll wait for, excuse me, the audit, and that's why I said that we will wait for the audit. These are unaudited numbers taken straight from the records, but the audit should clarify. The other thing that could attribute to that, if you look at your cash statement, I want to go back to the cash statement, or either your expense, whichever one you want to look at. And look at 732, which should be towards the end. It's on page 7. I'm sorry, that's not the page. Hold on a second. 736 is the claim number. So, yeah, it's on page 7. And so if you look there, see where it says year-to-date expenses, $3,000, that can't be. So I'm just saying it just can't be. So what's happening is that the account is a manual process. The account is not connected to the automatic check processing, which is another efficiency that I've talked with Wycom, so that all of the checks we write will come through this Wycom system, which means it'll be automatically recorded. What has to happen here, for example, is that we need to go back and do a journal entry for all of the checks that's been written this year, because I mean, you know it's been more than $3,000. And it's something that we will probably catch up with the audit. And I'm not, I can't say if that happened in 2013. I mean, I can't say that that happened or not. I don't have a statement. And because there's 2 audits going on, I choose not to spend a lot of energy in reviewing 2013 because they'll come out with the numbers. So I think that when the audits are finished through the fiscal watch team and the IPA, that we'll have some numbers that will be more definitive, and basically we'll have to use them because they basically will put the numbers out. So that's why I say that although most of the activity is recorded here, if there's something that's missed or what have you. So, I mean, I have no idea how the 2013 numbers were derived, and I haven't spent the energy to go back to figure out. The auditors are being paid to do it.
Who's Wycom? You mentioned Wycom.
That's our check printing. If you've ever received a check from us, like your paycheck, you see it's pre-printed and what have you. But it's also tied to, it's linked to the financial record. So when a check is printed, it automatically goes here. So we're trying to link all of our accounts like that. So that would help with issues like this. You won't have to go back and manually do a journal entries.
Are there any other questions on the cash investment portfolio? Before we close, I know, Irene, you said that the audits are near completion. When can we expect to see those reports on the findings from 2 separate audits that are being completed?
Well, with the fiscal watch team, I really can't say. I mean, you know, I'm sure they're moving along because they need to make a determination of whether we stay in fiscal watch or move forward. So I expect once we sit on the plan that they will be coming back with some information, probably in September. Now, in terms of the IPAs, it's usually a couple of months after they complete their reports. Their report is due, the GAP report is due in Columbus July 31st, so that's what we've been running a race today to get that done, which it is. And the IPA, which is with Zupcar, has to be completed and in Columbus by August the 31st, which is late. And usually, I would say it'll be October before we see those reports. I mean, that report. It's usually a couple of months after the due date. So it'll be about October.
Okay. Does anyone have any other comments or questions before I adjourn this meeting? All right, this meeting is adjourned at 7:38.